Excellent, and welcome to the TADSummit online conference. We have a fun session lined up with Dan, who is now somebody. Some people have claimed you're the mother of vCon. I'm not convinced of that. I would say creator. I consider to be closer. Thomas is the vCon father.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Don't deny that. But you can also have a creator as well as a vCon father.
All
It
right.
is one entity, multiple roles. But anyway, this is a session focused on the geeky side of vCon because often not enough time and attention is paid to what happened during the creation of the software. So that's what we're going to do now. Make sure I get the right terminology here. You created the Pi vCon server. So that's the open source server you created, is that correct?
Yeah, that's the name.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get any product or commercial names in that. Why don't we just get straight down to it and you sort of give us a little background on vCon as you see it, and then into what you went through in creating the Pi vCon server.
Okay. So I the I mean I don't know whether the audience already knows what a vCon is. If I should
No,
start
you
at
start at the
basics or
beginning. Yeah,
all right. So
Well, just for the record, we have the biggest audience in telecom, 20,000 subscribers. So, and any audience that's been listening to you is minuscule compared to ours.
all right.
So people know VCons, but they haven't met you yet. They've seen Thomas, they've seen Vinny, they've seen Ken Huron.
yes,
So we've been. I mean, Alan. Again, it's the first podcast we did, so it's kind of exciting to have you back here because we knew it way back when that this would catch on, and just what a great team, what a great momentum you guys got going on.
Oh, thank you.
absolutely.
And I appreciate the opportunity here to talk about it. So Tom's approached me to work on this vCon concept that he had. And we worked together to put together the idea and started doing some implementations to kind of test the concept and things like that. Very simple stuff at first. And then I went off and did a whole lot of thinking and noodling and put together a internet draft, which is kind of the way that you propose a standard in the IETF. Yeah. All right. And so in that, we get to what it is. I haven't explained that yet. So vCon is a standard, or is intended to be a standard data exchange between your contact center and the enterprise or any consumer of that data that you've captured in a conversation. And by conversations, I mean anything you can think of, SMS exchange, email threads, phone calls, video conferences, web chat, whatever your favorite, communication mode is,
Yeah,
that you may use in a contact center. Now, it's not focused specifically on contact center. That's one of kind of three kind of areas that we put in the original charter for the work group in the IETF. But a lot of it is focused on contact center
yeah,
initially, because that's where we've got traction and interest and things like that. So
yeah.
the idea was to capture, metadata about your conversation: who, what, where, when, why, how, etc. As well as the conversation itself, whether it was text or audio or video in the original media, as well as kind of post-conversational analysis that you might do on that. If it was an audio conference, you might transcribe it.
Yeah.
You might generate some notes or a summary or action items and things like that. These are all forms of analysis of a conversation.
Yeah.
And then also capture like ancillary documents. If I was, presenting a slide deck, or if we signed an NDA in the context of this conversation, or whatever kind of contextual documents or discussion documents or whatever that are relevant to the conversation are part of the conversation, right? And so the idea was to have this standard container to be able to do this data exchange of information about the conversation, including the conversation, so that you can take it out of the source of that, which maybe your email system, maybe your phone center, maybe your text processing center. It could be many different places within an enterprise. Many enterprises, larger businesses, have multiple call centers, right?
Yes.
They have multiple email addresses and processing systems.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so the idea is to make it easier for the enterprise to be able to import all this data from all over the place in vastly different formats in a consistent abstracted way.
Yeah.
So that you have that data, and to make it easier to use that data. If
Exactly.
you label the same pieces of data, no matter what the source is, in the same way, it makes it easier for you to use that data, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it seems like, I mean, I think it's a really powerful tool, and it's getting traction. There's a lot of people working on it. We just had our first interoperability event, and we had 9 different implementations. They're testing interoperability, and so that was kind of the focus of this internet draft, was to define the standard. We use JSON as the format, or for this container. And we define, the data that needs to go into that JSON object to be able to exchange your conversational information. Now, this, has some additional interesting traits, like, if I'm using AI models or ML models to do analysis and things like that, putting all this data in the same format, it really makes it easier for me to test and train and improve my AI models.
Yes.
And so this is a kind of an added bonus. The IETF focus is on the data exchange, but having your data in a similar format, or having a consistent format that you can use your data, has a bunch of other benefits as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I always think of it, it's a file type for conversations. Full stop.
Right.
If you have a conversation, no matter where it is, it's a file type. So it can be stored and shared. So that's the most important thing, is that interrupt, that sharing across your ecosystem. And when you start to share across ecosystems, things get a little trickier, because maybe some of the documents aren't approved for public. So it could be that, with that, then there's different rights. But again, that's some of the issues that you've been successfully solving.
Yeah, so that was the thing, I mean, we had when we first talked about this idea, some people just, threw up these alarms as, oh my God, you're sharing my information. So we had addressed this, and so built into the vCon and in this container and exchange is a number of security features. First of all, you can provide integrity and proof by signing it and saying, all right, whoever is signing it is saying that this is a legitimate conversation and hasn't been modified, and I can prove at some future point in time that this conversation existed at some pre-existed some particular date, and that it hasn't been modified, right? So that's gives you integrity and proof. And it's all self-contained, right? It's in the vCon. I don't need to go look it up in a database someplace. It's all in the container. So if whoever signed it, it goes out of business, I still have the signature, and I have their certificate to prove that they signed it on a specific date. So the other thing in terms of privacy and security, we built in these 2 other constructs. First of all, redaction. So you get a conversation, you record a conversation in a call center, it may have personal information, somebody's social security number, or their account number, or their name or email address, which may you may not want to distribute further. And there's no need for it generally, for typical analysis of the conversation afterwards. And so what we built is this concept of redaction. So you can take a vCon, redact the PII out of it, the personal identifiable information, and then construct a new vCon which has this redacted information.
Yeah.
Or has the information redacted from, and then you can preserve, the original by referencing it. But you don't want to. But you don't want anybody to be able, everyone to be able to reference that.
Correct.
So you can encrypt the original one, and there's a mechanism and means defined on how to do that. Standard way to do that with vCon. So you use Jose to sign that, and then or JWE if you want to get specific. So I'm sorry, you not to encrypt it, not sign. So you encrypt your original conversation, and nobody can get that but whoever has the key or that you allow to have that key.
Yeah.
And then you have your new redacted version, which has the PII removed, that you can then broadcast to a larger audience and not worry about people's privacy being shared elsewhere.
And that was actually the first thing we did with the first vCon TAD hack, was doing redaction. And
cool.
It was just great to see the young developers learning about vCon, understanding what it is. It's a file type of conversation, and then seeing them being able to, and seeing the sophistication with which then we're looking at how redaction could be performed. Because if you just put a blank tone in, it's disruptive. If it's quiet, it can be quite annoying. So it's interesting to see how they were playing around in ways in which information can be redacted, yet the content is still pleasant, I guess would be one word to listen to by third parties. But yeah, it was great to see. So it's, again, an initial capability that we've seen experimented with many times over by developers at TADAC.
Cool. Yeah, and the redaction is, it's up to you. We don't define how you do the redaction. You could redact the transcript and completely remove the audio recording, right?
Yep.
And you don't have to worry about tone or whatever you want to blank things out with.
Yes.
You just have the transcript. Yeah. And in many cases, that's all you really need for most. Now that misses the kind of the sentimental or tone in that, but there are transcription services that can label that as well. So it can be as part of the transcription is that there was tone or here, and the nice thing about that, completely removing the audio is then you don't have to worry about people voice printing or something like that, right?
That's true,
now maybe you don't need that level of security. But it's simple, right? It's simple to just remove the whole audio and just
easy, exactly,
and redact the transcript. So that's part of it. And so we have, like you said, we've got redaction and we've got full encryption, which will encrypt and protect the privacy of the entire vCon.
Yeah.
Or redaction for partial.
Cool.
Partial privacy. So those are that was something we built in from the beginning in terms of the first draft of at the ITF, and so we hope that addresses the large part. I mean, and there'll be follow on more features probably in the future. But we're going to get the core spec of the vCon done first, and then maybe in the future we will provide selective disclosure capabilities or things like that. I mean, so that's because
that was on my questions to ask. The upcoming features.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I think so. Selective disclosure, I think, is something we will work on in the future. While we're on the topic of future things, the other thing that I want to, again, these are going to be in the queue because what the ITF doesn't want is us having 10 documents working on in parallel, because then nothing gets done. Right?
Exactly.
So we're going to do some restructuring of the current document, divide it into some pieces so that we can accelerate certain pieces of that and get that done sooner.
Gotcha.
And then, but other future things is there isn't a standard format for or data schema for transcriptions. If you go,
True.
every single
It's
transcription
different. Yeah.
service has their own JSON. Usually it's JSON, but
Yep.
they're all different schemas. And
Yes.
so you have to write you have to write an abstraction on top of those to get, the same piece of data in this transcription versus that transcription.
Yeah.
And so, this is in our charter. I thought about this way back when we were writing the charter in the IETF 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
We, one of the few kind of media types or formats, if you will, file formats that we will address is going to be transcription. The transcription, because transcription is interesting. It's a form of analysis of the
Yes.
conversation,
Yep.
but it's also it is input to other analysis, right?
Correct. Yep.
So you've got this kind of iterative or recursive kind of processing of a transcription becomes input, and when things are input, you want to kind of standardize them just to make it easier for people to work on them. So
that's a very good point.
That's so. Other things on the future list, I think I think there's some interesting discussion about in terms of consent, right?
Yes.
And things like that. There's nothing in the vCon currently about capturing consent or what.
Well, there isn't for most communications in capturing consent, so that's an interesting one because.
So that's something I think is down the road a little bit still, but there's discussions, and there's some work in the ITF right now just on definition of terms, right? From a legal perspective, what is consent? What does that mean? And things like that. And so that kind of discussion is happening now, and that'll lead into some features. I think they'll be fairly simple to add to vCon, but we need to know what it is to
automation within like TCPA. Do you consent to not only be recorded for this conversation, but for us to contact you later?
Right.
Now, I mean, there are issues about whether that needs to be written down, but I think that sort of automation and capturing in a way that it can be standardized and authenticated can be very powerful.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, it's like, well, you have to give it in writing, and there's all these, and it has to be website needs to include these terms and conditions, and it's just like nobody looks at your website. You're putting a requirement on that doesn't matter. While somebody is talking and asking and didn't include particular phrases and terms, then you've got clear, proven evidence. So that's very interesting. So this is quite interesting in terms of the standardization around transcription. And consent management. I think, even though that's not the core of what you're trying to do, I think there's a lot of value that could be added there as well.
Yeah, this starts, this is all stuff that comes up when you start talking about, this exchanging data. There's, people who are always looking at different aspects of what that means, right? So
cool. Oh, that's good. So again, we're supposed to be geeky, so we've been focusing a lot on the features and functions. But as you were creating the project, I'm just interested. I mean, why Python?
The open source project.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. I guess I a number of reasons, but I've been doing a lot of work in Python for the last 7 years or things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a C++ guy, right? I did C++ back in 1986, and I love C++, and it's very useful and powerful and things, and I can do a lot of stuff with it, but I can do a lot more stuff with Python in a quicker amount of time.
Yeah.
And so Python's not as performant as C++. It's and there's certain things that are more powerful or more, I would say, more stable or stronger in C++.
Yeah.
But Python is just this incredible community of contributors, of people who've created these add-on packages in Python, and it's monstrous. I think it's larger than any other language. I mean, maybe Java might
Yeah,
be
maybe.
close, but there's really a huge number of people who are contributing, new packages and features and functions on it. In the ITF, we're getting, these new standards all the time. Most of the, at least the upper layer, IETF stuff is, you'll see an implementation in Python, before
Yes.
you'll see it anywhere else, right?
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
just easy and quick to write stuff like that, and that made it, an easy choice for this, just because we're for the encryption we're using, the Jose, the JavaScript, web,
Yeah,
encryption,
yeah.
JWE, and in the Jose JWS, which is, the JavaScript, web, signing capability.
Mhm.
You know, you may have heard the term JOTs or web tokens.
Oh yeah, yeah.
These are, that's basically just a special form of a JWS, or
Oh, I didn't
uh,
realize. Okay,
it's, these are all part of the Jose family
gotcha.
of things in that are defined in the ITF, and so, this, the tools to do that stuff, it's all there
Yeah,
in Python, right? In fact, you have probably multiple choices for each of those to, that's probably the bigger problem is, all right, which one of these should I use?
yeah,
But
exactly.
but the other, I think one of the, kind of, most powerful things that made Python attractive to me is the introspection. So introspection gives you the ability to look at your library of functions, right?
Yeah,
So somebody provides a library, they may provide documentation for that thing, they may not.
yeah,
Even if they do absolutely nothing, I can go query that library and figure out all the classes that they've
yes,
defined. I
yeah,
can figure out all the functions they defined. I can figure out all the methods on those classes. I
yeah,
can figure out what they named all the arguments to their methods.
yes,
Now,
which
they
is
may not
very
put any
powerful.
text in
Yeah,
there or documentation to define what any of those things means, but it's a big big step further than having absolutely nothing. You got a C++ library, you can figure out what the entry
yeah,
points are in there, right? And
exactly.
and that's it.
Yep,
And
it's
so
powerful.
introspection, and the thing is, you can build a lot of stuff on top of introspection, and Python has. So
Hmm.
you can load somebody's library, and you can say help on the name of that library, and it'll tell you, here's all the classes, right?
Yeah,
And so and if you've got a good programmer, they've documented, they put in line in the code, they've
yes,
documented the names of what this class does, what this
yeah,
method does, what this argument does, and you get all that then,
yeah,
through introspection. I don't have to go to, find a website someplace. It's all in the library,
yeah,
right? So
exactly.
I just like that, and
Yeah.
we built on that when we built the open source Python implementation in both Python vCon and Python or Py vCon server, right? So the Python vCon is the low level. There's a command line interface and a library of functions
Gotcha,
for operating on a vCon.
gotcha,
Um, and then we built on top of that package, we built this Py vCon server, right? Which
gotcha.
it has kind of vCon workflow, and
Yeah,
it has this AI-based framework for doing analysis and decisions on your conversations and what to do with them.
gotcha.
So,
Cool. No, no,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
and so we built on all this introspection and automated documentation. We use a framework for providing RESTful APIs. It's called Fast API,
Yeah,
and this gives it allows us to build these RESTful interfaces to the server, so that you can go, take your vCon and run it on what we call a processor. A processor takes, one or more vCons in
Yeah.
and some configuration and options, and then it gives you one or more vCons back.
Gotcha.
Right? And so we have this framework for processor, and then we have this what we call a pipeline, which is a workflow. Right? It's
Yeah.
a set of these processors, one sequenced after another, where you take, input some set of vCon, one or more vCons into the processor, and then it outputs one more, and that goes on to the next processor and the next processor, right? So you got this sequential set of processors that you define in a workflow, or what we call pipeline, right?
Pipeline.
And that's all configuration. You don't need to code to create these pipelines. It's just we've got the set of processors that are part, with the server, and you can write your own, right? You can write your own proprietary ones. You can, make some open source ones and write your own processors and plug them into the server and use them in your work, right?
Yeah.
And so this, what I'm getting to in terms of, what the Python constructs that enable this is, so I wrote this framework where, this plugin framework, and you load a new processor of your own.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be huge. Some of these are like 30 lines of code, right? And you create your processor, you register the processor, and then automatically the server defines a new RESTful API for you automatically, no new code.
Yep.
Creates an interface, a RESTful interface, to be able to use that processor through the server, right? And not only that, it provides you documentation, right? All automatically.
That's
assuming
powerful.
you've this is all in the 50 lines of defining my processor.
Yep.
That includes documentation, right? So now I have a RESTful interface, and there's a standard way to define RESTful interfaces called Swagger. I don't know.
That's right. Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So the server generates a Swagger doc, which includes the definition of how to call these RESTful interfaces on all of the processors that you've configured or loaded. And it gives you documentation on what are the arguments that you have to pass in, what is, what this is.
Interesting.
And then so we use that. We use the Swagger thing, and we generate READMEs and things like that.
Yep.
Because so that you don't have to run the server to look at some of the documentation and stuff like that.
That's excellent. Absolutely. It's funny because I was having a conversation today with Kin Lane, because he was bemoaning that you can't really refer to an API as a product. And I was sort of agreeing with him, but then making fun of the fact that, we have an API call. Well, it's just basically machine readable web page. And the fact is, it very quickly becomes a workflow, and, so going down that whole channel in terms of, it needs to actually do something of value to the business before you can really claim it's a product. Rather than sitting there by itself. But it's I think that automation and creating those README and Swagger files is very powerful.
Yeah.
I'm surprised because I was having an argument a couple of weeks ago when we were first chatting around this session with a vendor that was implementing APIs, and I was pointing, hey, you should get some some of these capabilities in some sample code, like Python. What? I was like, it's quite powerful, Yeah. But anyway, we won't go there.
Yeah. So,
cool.
And just, stacking on top of that.
Yeah.
Then, front end. So what I'm working on right now is a workflow editor, right?
Yeah.
That reads the Swagger doc, discovers all these processes are in there, and lets you construct a workflow with the processors that you want to use. And so
as a GUI, or is it?
Yeah. So it's web web browser front end.
Gotcha.
That lets you it uses this there's also already RESTful APIs for defining for adding a workflow definition, right?
Yeah.
And listing your list of workflow definitions and things like that. Well, now I working on a friend, and most of the stuff I do is backend, right? I'm a backend kind of died in terms of, we write interfaces, and then, front end, is for people who do that every day. I write, like I write a front end, web interface, maybe once a year, and it's
Yeah.
ugly, very
Yeah.
ugly.
It's called the CLI.
But
What
it's
mode you want?
but it works. But
Yeah.
so this is I wanted to write this just because I wanted to make it and illustrate how easy it is to create these workflows, right? And
Oh,
so because the whole point is these workflows are no code, right?
exactly.
And so I'm writing this interface that lets you read an existing workflow definition if you or pipeline
Yeah.
definition, and it'll illustrate it, right? It'll show the chaining of
Yes. Yeah.
this processor goes to this processor, and it lets you explore the configuration you have in workflow for each of those processors, and also lets you
Ooh.
edit it. Add
Yeah.
new processors in your workflow or your pipeline. Remove some or whatever, or edit the properties and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now it can do this because it reads the Swagger doc for the server,
Yeah.
discovers what all the processors are,
Mhm.
what the names of all the different processors that you can use,
Yeah.
discovers what the parameters are for each of those
Yeah.
processors, and then it presents them to you, so you can you don't need to understand what the schema is.
Oh.
It gives you the names of all the parameters, the
Yeah.
type, and if it's defined in the plugin, default values for these things, or example values
Yeah.
of these things,
Exactly.
right? So
Mm.
it just the point here again is to make to really illustrate that defining these workflows is codeless, right?
Yes.
You
Exactly.
don't
Oh
need to
yeah.
write code to do this.
I'm thinking of all the testing that helps with as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's quite powerful. So that's very clear on your rationale for using Python. I think that's great because it enables a lot of people to get in and start playing with it and building their workflows as fast as possible. Because I think that's the core. When you're talking about conversational data, you're applying workflows. I mean, it's going to be used for training data. We've always said it's robot food, but beyond that is the particular workflows when you're dealing with this in real time. So that's cool. Now, I'm just thinking we've covered the future stuff, we've covered the rationale. Um, are there certain things you've built that are like favorites, like pet projects that you're really proud of in putting this?
Within this Python thing, or in
Yeah.
general? Yeah. Okay.
Or in
Yeah.
general, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's look
Yeah.
more generally now,
Well,
because it's clear you are in love with Python.
yeah. I have to say that this vCon server project I
Yeah.
think is one of the most elegant things I've ever built.
Oh,
It
cool.
just and I've built some pretty elegant
Yeah. Oh,
things,
yeah.
and
Absolutely.
over the 35, it's approaching 40 years of work. But I am proud of this. I think I really this is a second iteration, and I think that I really in that second iteration really cleaned it up, and really made this I think a really elegant solution for dealing with vCons. And I mean, the point of the server is not only just to really it's an integration platform as well.
Exactly.
It's a way to bind export from your legacy system into the server, and maybe import into some other system, right? CRM or whatever. And
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
there's multiple ways that to integrate various systems, either through building a processor that's an adapter to some either
Exactly.
existing system, your legacy system, or some third party system out in the cloud.
Hmm.
As well as there's other bindings too. There's through the database interfaces, which are abstracted. You can
Yeah.
plug in that to and create a wrapper to use your legacy customer data platform, and just create a vCon adapter
Hmm.
onto that, and you can use this server with it. So I just
Cool.
it's I think it's a fairly simple and elegant solution. And the server will run is serverless mode is microservices or full-fledged server, and so it's a really flexible, and I think as I said, I think it's one of my I think one of my favorites, or more projects that I'm really proud of.
Cool. And it's great that that's going to be leading the how most developers out there first experience vCon. And with serverless, that's great because you're going to have a lot of, I mean, most of the contact center people I talk to, they're already storing the data, but not in vCon format. It's like, yeah, we just store it here and it's fine for our training. It's fine for all our internal projects. I say, but what happens if then they start, you go through that what if, and they see the value of using a standard. So you can imagine with serverless, then you've got, gigabytes of data you need to basically convert, and being able to basically serverless enables you to like run it overnight. It's just jump, bump. Oh yeah, all the data is now converted over. Granted, I mean, it's using a ton of processing time, but it's serverless, so it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
That's
and so, I mean, it's really nice in the sense that the RESTful APIs you can provide the vCon as part of the RESTful call, or you can provide it by reference, and so
gotcha.
there's a CRUD based storage mechanism for vCons that you can use or decide not to use, and so you can store them externally or internally as part of the server.
I mean, this is good. I've really enjoyed the fact that we've had a proper geeky conversation, because these things do need to happen. Because, it's great to talk about $100 million and all these, particular use cases, but it's nice to get down to what, as a developer, when that lands on your basically desk in terms of, right, okay, let's get our data converted. You've got a tool that's so easy to use in a language that, in fact, I wanted to tell you, I was reading a Scientific American article this afternoon, and it was some particle physics stuff. And again, they were using Python for some of the modeling. And I was like, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But again,
there's a lot of analysis stuff like that. It's done in Python, and there's people there's these specialized languages like R and things like that.
Yes.
I don't know enough about them to judge them, but me at the high level, it's like, why? you can do all that in Python.
I know, yeah. But it's for some of them, it for their particular problem area, for it's adapted to, it saves them having to learn too much because they've not come from the C++ background. But anyway, again, Dan, thank you so much for your time. This is great, and I hope to get this out in the next day or two. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alan. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope we can have a number of future conversations.
Absolutely,
on vCon
yes,
and by vCon server.
Excellent. Thank you so much.